A very good afternoon to one and all present, and welcome to the fifth of a series of six ICMR Elsevier collaborated webinars. I'm Vishal Gupta, Senior Customer Consultant South Asia at Elsevier, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Dr. Vinita Saroha, Customer Consultant, and Mr. Adityapal Singh, Senior Account Manager, South Asia. Well, as you can see, I woke up to a chilly December morning in Delhi, and I wish all of you a pleasant day ahead. I would like to reiterate some ground rules before we start the webinar to ensure a smooth session. Please ensure that you are in the listen only mode. And if you do see an audio icon on your screen, please make sure it is muted to avoid any disturbances during the live session. If there are any technical issues or disconnection from the speakers, we request you to kindly allow us some time to allow them to join back. If you have any questions for the speakers, kindly post them in the Q&A box only. And I repeat, please post your questions in the Q&A box only and not in the chat box. We'll try and answer as many questions as possible in the end. So every day, research and health professionals dedicate themselves to improving outcomes for communities, patients, and society at large. And it has become increasingly critical now, especially during the COVID times, as researchers are expected to deliver accurate and precise information to the world. Keeping that in mind, Elsevier, in collaboration with ICMR, has come up with a series of workshops to address these challenges and help researchers and healthcare professionals contribute to the research and health domains. Our last four webinars have been widely attended by over 2,700 participants, and the feedback has been amazing. We are glad that this joint initiative by ICMR and Elsevier has been appreciated by the researchers and has benefited the research community across the world, especially in India. In continuation to the same, today we have our penultimate webinar titled Effective Writing Skills for Promoting Research. What do we need to know? I'm glad to welcome our first speaker of today, Ms. Fernanda Ogochi. Fernanda is the executive publisher of Pharmacology and Pharmaceutical Sciences for Elsevier. She is responsible for the overall development and strategic direction of 11 scientific journals, including Journal of the Controlled Release and Advanced Drug Delivery Reviews. She joined Elsevier in 2010 and has occupied several positions in the company in strategy and market intelligence. Prior to Elsevier, she worked 6 years in the banking and in the healthcare industries in Brazil. Fernanda holds a BSc degree in business administration from the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and an MBA from Tilburg University Business School, Netherlands. The floor is all yours, Fernanda.
Thank you, Vishal. It's great to be here today. Good afternoon for everybody, and I hope you can hear me well. I'm sure that Vishal will let me know if I'm speaking too fast or too slow, and he will give me some guidance in terms of timing. So it is really a great pleasure to be here today, sharing a little bit of the collective knowledge that Elsevier has created about preparing scientific journals and promoting research. And I do hope that shed some lights for you in your research and how you can do it, promote it even better. So for today's agenda, let me just get this. Today's agendas, I have three key pillars. Before we even go into writing and promoting, I want to just give you a glimpse of the background on academic publishing. And the reason I'm doing this, it's usually is because most of us, when we are thinking about our article and we are really working very hard, we just want to get it published, right? And we can get it very frustrated why it has been rejected in one journal, perhaps two journals, three journals, and you are not alone. So I just want you to share a little bit about how the world is actually operating, so you understand where your paper, your manuscript actually fits in this wider ecosystem. So I'll talk a little bit about this, and then I will go through the preparing the manuscript and really the promoting the research. So the brief background academic publishing, basically what I want you to be aware of this slide is that the global publication volume is really growing. So what you can see here in this graph is that between 2000 until 2020, the world has the scholarly output for all the areas, so physical sciences, medical sciences, life sciences, social sciences, in all the different publishing houses, Elsevier, Wiley, Springer Nature, and so on and so forth. We have published collectively more than 1,300 million papers. So this was in 2000. And if you see the trajectory, actually now in 2020, the world has published collectively, all of us collectively, more than 3.5 million articles, just for you to have a sense of the sheer volume we are talking about. And then I brought few underlining regions and countries for you to be able to see what's driving this growth, right? So the key growth, it's coming. So you see here mustard a little bit of European Union, but really who is driving the key growth is basically China, which has already surpassed United States in 2019 in terms of publication. And you see that India is also growing, not as fast as China, but it's also showing steady growth since 2000 in terms of publication. So if you think about it, the overall annual growth year on year is about 5%, just for you to have a sense of what the sheer volume we are talking about. And in medicine, the same is happening, right? So if you see in 2000, we were talking about a bit more than 400,000. And now, especially in COVID time, in 2019 to 2020, we saw a deep increase in terms of articles that have been published in medicine as well. So it's close to 1 million articles, 927,000. Here. What you see is that, especially during COVID times, we saw that many areas, particularly in life sciences and in medicine, they saw a sharp growth because people were also trying together to work towards solving COVID and identify and finding more ways that we can tackle this disease. So just for you to have a very glimpse on our key, the way that Elsevier collaborates closely with research to empower knowledge, just for you to have a sense of publication figures here. In terms of submissions, we are talking about 2.4 million. So again, I know that all of you, more than 200, join us today. We are thinking about our own publication, how many years, months we have put our sweat, blood, and tears on this publication. But once you come to submit to our systems, we are talking about 2.4 million articles that are being submitted every year. And then we count with our 75,000 plus editorial board members who are across the globe and more than 25,000 editors who help us triage and make the right decisions for each one of those papers. We do count with the collaboration of 1.4 million reviewers to covering hundreds of disciplines who actually give us the peer review comments on your paper. And based on that, our editors do make a decision whether the article. So then here, what you are seeing is the 519,000 plus papers that we have published just last year. Once you did make that cross from 2.4 to 500,000 plus articles that we have published, then you go to Science Direct with our platform that has more than 60 million unique visitors. So it is really massive. And then just for you to have a sense, 1.3 billion articles on a yearly basis has been downloaded by research. So it is really, when we are talking about our own research, you have to understand that this falls in an ecosystem, in a wider system that's basically the journals. So now let me go a little bit on preparing the manuscripts for a scientific journal, right? So this is slightly different than if you would think about writing for a regular journal, because it does go through peer review. So why do you want to publish in a journal, right? Why do we want to publish in a scientific journal? So you might have your own personal reasons. You want to get your PhD degree, you want to get more funding, you want to get your next tenure, you want to grow in your your position, you want to disseminate data, whatever, you can have your own personal reasons. But what you have to understand, and these are all valid and they are all your reasons, but you have to understand that when editors are getting your manuscript, the editors and the reviewers and the research community, they don't consider your reasons for publishing or not your paper. So why? The first thing that our editors, when we are actually thinking about publishing your article, the key things that our editors think about it is it new information? It is a new technique? It is a new concept? You can have all the three of them, but actually it's not in the scope of my journal, so you might be rejected anyway. So just for you to sense that there are different reasons why you might get, you want to get published, and why our editors and the research community might say it's not good enough, or it's not part of the journal, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, the key question we are trying to answer is, does this paper help other researchers in this field? And the key thing that you have to keep in mind is we want to disseminate new scientific information. We want to collaborate. You want to find, the new partners that you will work in the future. And ultimately, what we want is really to address the challenges of the world, right? The CREATE challenge. It's about ending poverty. It's about tackling climate change, and so on and so forth. So those are the big questions that we are together trying to solve. A scientific research article, it is a storytelling, right? It's about conveying a message, your scientific message to the crowd. So it's very important for you to reflect on the books that you read, the good books that you read and that you are hooked up to, and then think, why was it really interesting? What kept me, and why I was so drawn to that particular story? And here I share a few of them that was quite interesting for me and my editor, that we thought it was fascinating. It was those kind of books that you cannot get it away with. You have to read one more page. And the reason why we put it is because scientific research article, it is about storing. It is about telling a story, your research story. It's about what the findings you are getting. And it's also about explaining your own work for people who are not in your field, for your grandparents, for your kids, for your friends, for people. So you have to be able to translate this in a way that other people relate to. And the reason why I'm putting this slide here is because now it is so multidisciplinary. So if you want policymakers to be able to understand the importance of your research, you need to be able to talk to them in a way that's not technical. So sometimes what we see in our research groups, in our research articles, that a lot of the articles, they are so detailed, so methodic, but then it doesn't tell a story, or doesn't tell a story to someone who is slightly in a different field and doesn't understand all the nuances of your particular research. So you have to be able to move from very detailed to the big picture. And that's what this slide's talking about. So if you train these with your grandparents, your cousins, your relatives, and your kids, and if they can understand that, yes, you are going the right direction. So I will talk a little bit now about the general structure of the article, right? So different than other articles that you might read it in a magazine or in a journal, research articles, they have a very clear structure, what's expected, and how the readers will actually make sense of your article. So I broke this down. This is basically the key body. It can change between different areas, but all in all, most of the articles, the research articles, they will have these three key blocks. So you have the first one, that's basically the title and abstract and keywords. So what is this about? It's really, the title is really about identifying the main issue of the paper. So what's all about it, right? So it's the tagline, what it is your paper talking about. And then the abstract is basically the blurb, the summary, the purpose is where you will summarize what's the purpose, the methods, the results, the interpretation, and the conclusion. So it is very hard. It's much harder, the task to be done than you foresee in the beginning. But it is so crucial that your abstract, it is a good summary, and it is done in a way that's succinct and people can understand. And finally, in the first block is the keywords. And the keywords really determine whether your article is found or not. So no matter how great your research is, if people cannot find your article, you might not be able to collaborate or push your message to the world forward as you intended, because nobody can find your paper. Like I said, 3.5 million articles have been published just last year. So it's about making sure that you find your readers, you make sure that when you are writing your article, you think about the readers all the time. So basically what you want here is that your section is very informative, very attractive, and very effective. So that article, one, is indexed, is searchable, and two, that when people come to read just the abstract, usually they tend to read the title and the abstract. And if they find interesting, then you download. Think about yourself as a researcher, as a reader, right? So when you are doing your own research and you are thinking, okay, what's, the literature and what are the articles that I want to read? Think about yourself. What makes you tick yes or no for that article? Is because you read those summary and you think, interesting, I will go for the full article. If this part's not good enough, or if this part is not interesting enough, you might just drop it and move for the next article. So just be very intentful in this part. The second block is basically your body, right? Is the body, is the biggest part of your research. And it's composed by 4 parts. Basically, it's the introduction, which it's all about setting the scene, right? It's about giving the context, explaining the problem, what's existing already out there as solutions, what are the limitations of the solutions, and what's the key goal of your research. So why do you ended up doing what you are doing now? So this is the introductions, really setting the scene for the author, for the reader. It's almost like you are unfolding piece by piece to the reader what you are going through. And then the methods, really the details, and this is so important nowadays. If we want to reproduce, we have to be very detailed on this area, how you collect the data, which are the reagents you might be using, how you can replicate your own research. If I'm in Brazil or if I'm in Japan and I'm in a lab, how can I do it again, your research, and get the same results as you did? Equally important, especially for the medical community and the life science community, there are a lot of approvals on ethics. So patient approval, patient consent, or if we are talking about animal models, we might need animals consent to be, animal ethics approval to proceed with some of the investigations and experiments. Then you will go through the results. The results, really the main findings. It's highlighting, what's different, what's unexpected findings from your research. Sometimes you go with one hypothesis in our research, and then we find completely different results. So what were those key ones? And this is where you share this with the reader. This is what you share. And the final one, that's the discussion, is really about what's the results in relationship to the original question you pose and really the interpretation. So the difference here between the results and the discussion is that in the discussion, you will put really the interpretation, what I thought about it. Did the results show the same result, the same conclusions as I was thinking, or my original question, or I had completely different results and I have to rethink why we even posed the first question in the first place. So that's it's more when you can interpret some of those things. The only caution that you have to be here is that the reader's time is not unlimited, right? So brevity is a cardinal feature. So you have to be your own editor at first. You have to write as much as you want as an author, but then be fierce what needs to be
I think we have some disconnection from Fernanda's side. I request participants to please be patient while we try to reconnect with Fernanda. Thank you. I think Fernanda is disconnected, so we'll just wait for 2 minutes. We allow her to join back. I think Fernanda is back. Fernanda, you're on mute.
Sorry of my
No
connection.
problem. That's okay.
So until when did you hear, Vishal? Until when did you
Can
hear?
you just put on your slide? We can let you know.
Yeah, of course. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can. So I think we were on the last part here, right?
Conclusions.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so the conclusions, acknowledgements, reference, and supporting data. This is really about, it's about closing, right? It's about acknowledging all the funding bodies, the supporting teams you had it, you know, it's about the references. You are building your research up on the shoulders of giants, right? So make sure that you cite properly all the references that you used, you know, and that you give credit to who is due to.
Fernanda, I hear some people. I think can you start from the second section again?
Yeah,
about
sure.
from discussion on.
Okay, of course. Okay, so discussion. So the key part on discussions is about the results in relationship to your original question. So the discussion is all about the interpretation, right? So the difference between the results and discussion is that the results, you are really just sharing the observations. What are the findings? What are the different findings? What are the unexpected ones? And the discussion really puts into context, really gives the interpretation of those results. Is this aligned with the original hypothesis I have it? Or is this completely different? And, you know, what does it all mean? So this is the most interesting part. It's a lot of the interesting part of the paper, right? A lot of people really like to read that part. The only caveat we always say here is that the reader's time is not unlimited, right? So you have to be very, very sharp in what you are adding, enough for people to understand, to be able to reproduce your research, but at the same time, not too long that people will not even want to read your article because it's a whole novel. And the last part, that's the conclusions, acknowledgement, reference, and supporting data. Basically, I cover some of them. And here, what I think it's very important to highlight is that transparency is key. So particularly for the areas of life sciences and medical sciences, if there is a company sponsoring you, there is in pharma, we see this a lot. There is a lot of research being done by the big pharma or biotech company, and per se, conflict of interest is not unethical. But you have to be always, because the most transparent you are, of course, even the tobacco industry wants to know the research and what for example, smoke can do to your body, but people should be aware that this money or this funding is coming from those companies, or it's coming from those sources. So transparency is really a key. In doubt, disclose, and you can always put this to the editors as a question, and they will take it even better because they will see you coming up front and saying, look, this is being sponsored by a pharma company, or this is being sponsored by a research biochemistry area, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the process of writing an article is really bottom up. So the way we read our article is top down, like I showed before, but actually how you build it up, your article, how you write it, your article is bottom up. It's all about building blocks, right? So first you have your own data. That's basically your figures and the tables. This is everything that you have collected. And then you move forward. Then you move forward to methods, results, and discussion. So here's where you describe how do I get that data? What are the key results I'm seeing? Then how do I interpret those results? And then you go to the conclusion and interpretation. So basically the conclusion will set what are has this been aligned with what I was thinking? What are the global studies, telling me the specific ones? Are there any new studies that I would like to do it in the future? And the introduction, it's like what has been done so far, where my research is sitting within this bigger body of knowledge or context. And then the very last one is the title, abstract, and keywords. And you should think very carefully because they are the ones who actually summarize all the text that you have written. So the way we read it is top down, but the way that we say we should write is bottom up. It's not always easier, as you know, but in any case, we always say that in the end, you should always revise the last bit, because that's really, it's almost like your visit cards. So if they don't even pass through the title, some titles we see in some of my journals, there are some titles who are like 3 lines long. And then my editors already said, no, 3 lines is not. So now we limited, some journals limited to a certain number of characters or a certain number of words, because they should be very snappy. And you should think about this when you are writing your own article. All right, so now let me go to promoting your research for maximum exposure. So you spend all this time, right? So for you to increase the impact of your research and really get noticed, you think that this will happen, you know, just after you get published, right? And then you say, all right, now I will actually promote my published article. But no, in fact, you should think about this since the beginning, since when you are preparing your article and going through all the building blocks, like I mentioned before. You can do this also throughout when your article just have been published, how you connect with your network to promote it, your article. And the third one is monitoring your article. So I will go through each one of those 3 parts with a little bit more details. So when you are preparing your article, like I said before, really spend some time on the abstract, on the conclusion, the references, you know, really think strategically here. How do I make sure that this abstract is the best one, that when people will read, they will get super excited and want to read more of this article, right? Share research data. The more you are sharing data, and now it's becoming, we see more trends of funding bodies asking for researchers to shed a light on the research data. So not only the tables they want to share, but share the whole data. Make it as easy to understand the charts. Sometimes it is our own pitfall when we are so in depth working on our research. We know the charts so much that we think, oh, everybody will understand. But actually, many people, the majority, they will be reading this for the very first time. So make sure you have the labeling correct. Make sure that your graphs are nicely done. You know, spend some time on this. You can even use professional illustrations if you would like to. There are several ways that you can enhance your own article, and use clear and correct manuscript language, right? So use a proper language. And in India, I don't think it's really a problem, but especially for non-speaking, non-native English speakers, this can be a barrier. When you're preparing your article, you have to keep in mind that that search engine optimization, so SEOs, they really can help your articles to appear, right? So again, think of yourself as a reader, and when you put mRNA in vaccines, for example, and then it comes 300 pages of results, how many times do you go even to the second page? So just make sure that your article is always on the top. And how you can do this is basically you can make your article visible with SEO, and then you can, you know, create all the key information in the abstract, the keywords. Don't use the same keywords as you have it in the abstract, because usually the index and abstract systems, they use both. They use the title, actually they use 3. They use the title, the abstract, and keyword. So you can, you know, think about it. What are the words that I want to be associated with my research, that people who are looking for that particular topic will find it? Make sure that you link some more, and that's very important, because the more you are linking, you know, the more people will be able to see through different channels, and we will help you, right? So we will give you the share links for most of our journals that you can share immediate in your social media. Once your article has been promoted, once your article has been published, then you start promoting, right? And you can do this in several ways. So you can share your article. Like I said, we have the share links that the average clicks 3 times, you know, 3.9 times for share links click at least once. You know, if you share your own link with in Facebook, in Twitter, in LinkedIn, whatever platform you choose, or all the platforms, you see that this number increases to 13.9. So just make sure there is a reason why we share the share links with you, is for you to really promote your own article. You can use your own platform. It can be email. One thing that I heard once from one researcher, she said, what I do after the research is done, and most people, they tend to forget, they go to the next research article, she stops and she thinks about all the people that helped her to build that article. Could be a reference, could be a reviewer, could be an acknowledgement. And she takes the time to write to that person, say, hi, my article has been published in this journal. I think you might be interested to read it. I use your reference, your research helped me in this way or in that way. Very small, don't make it a big letter, but if it's very snappy and you just show your research, you might even get one of your, your idols to actually read your article. Wouldn't be this fun? You can also be discoverable online, right? So here I got the example from Dr. Bena Thomas, who will be talking with us today. How is her profile in ICMR? So make sure that you have a profile either in your university. Make sure that you take time, because the university or the research centers, they want to have it. Some of them are pulled automatically, but some of them are not. So make sure you give them enough information so people can find you. Again, this can be done in several ways. It can be in LinkedIn, it can be in OrchidID, it can be in Scopus, and so on and so forth.
Nanda, you have 5 minutes.
5, thank you. I'm almost in the end. The media relationships is about the university, right? So the university or the research centers, they want to brag about all the research you are doing, right? So if the research is happening in that lab and it is for a wider consumption, just make sure that you work with the PR in your group, in ICMR, to make sure that your research is actually shared. They want to share those things. Make sure that you connect with those people. In Elsevier, we also have it, research highlights. It's not for all the research, but research that we think is for a wider consumption, not only researchers, but also policymakers, journalists, etc. If you think that you fall in this category, make sure you connect with us. And then we have also the Atlas, which is basically an award that we give for articles that are being published and have a societal impact, a real societal impact. Participate into conferences, make sure that you have good posters, present your article out there, go to networks. When you are going to conferences, make sure you connect with the people who are related to your conference, do your homework. And when you are there, it's much nicer for you to discuss upon that. And share your data. You can do this within the article, you can do this linking different articles in a repository, and so on and so forth. And after that, you can monitor your article, right? So monitor how is your article performance. In Mendeley, we have dashboards. We also have researcher dashboards that can help you with the usage, how many citations your article got it, how many media mentions. We also have for each one of our articles, we have Plume metrics, which allows you to see in the journals which are the top most popular article. In each article, you are able to see how many social media citations you got it, if you have citations, if you were mentioned, how much was the usage. So make sure that you see how your article is performing. Finally, I want to just share with you the Research Academy. That's a very wealthy platform, Elsevier platform, that discuss every single point in your research cycle. So you can look about research preparation, help tips and webinars about writing for your research, about publication process. Even some of the slides that I used today, you can also find there. You can also find in webinars, so you can choose when and what and how you want to consume this. But it is really, we create this platform really for you. So just make sure you use it. Questions, we will do it in the end. With that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for the interest. And I will give you back to you the floor, Isha.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fernanda, for your insightful talk on effective writing skills. And I think you put everything very correctly. And I think you mentioned quite right in the end that the Elsevier Researcher Academy has a plethora of such content where people can go and take up these free courses and learn about different stages of the entire research workflow, starting from how to apply for funding and then ending on how to increase your visibility, etc. So thank you so much for that. Um, I would now request Dr. Albina Nair, Scientist C, ICMR, and Assistant Editor, IJMR, to please introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Vishal, and welcome everybody to this capacity building exercise between ICMR and Elsevier. And thank you, Fernanda, for the solutionist approach that all Elsevier speakers bring to this forum. And so I think one of the most important key messages that Fernanda has nailed in is effective communication, a storytelling process, which is the most important to be able to communicate the findings, for example, of this ongoing pandemic to our future generations. That's something that we need to focus on. So continuing that chain of thought, as a student, I read an article in a business magazine, and I came across this terminology called knowledge economy. A very interesting terminology, but frankly speaking, it took me many years to understand the magnitude of this term. If you run a simple Google, what you would find is a knowledge economy is a system of consumption and production based on the intellectual capital, which is now the largest stakeholder, be it from on the academic front or the economic front across countries. So in order for this knowledge exchange to take place and be capitalized on, it's like Fernanda said, the most effective way to do that is to be able to communicate your research and your findings in the most succinct and the most legible manner. And that is frankly the clearest fashion of research that can be established. So of the different kinds of research data that is exchanged worldwide, an important but most of the times undermined entity is qualitative research, qualitative data. In our fast-paced academic lives, we often forget to take into consideration the emotional and ethical aspects of underlying many diseases among communities we generally term as samples. So socio-behavioral research bridges that gap, and it understands the crisis situations, for example, during this COVID pandemic, where mental health situations of be it the patient caregivers or the healthcare workers was deeply realized. So with this, I'm very happy to have two speakers today from the ICMR fraternity, Dr. Beena Thomas and Dr. Jayashree Kadirasan, who have taken their precious time out to enrich this session with their experiences, and we'll be elaborating further on the topic of socio-behavioral research and the methods associated to undertake such a research. Dr. Beena is the former head of socio and behavioral research at ICMR NIRT Chennai. She is a social scientist who comes with a vast experience of designing and conducting studies on various psychosocial issues around TB and HIV, including aspects such as gender differential, stigma, disclosure issues, healthcare seeking behavior, interventional and integrative service provision. She's been involved with many international collaborators such as the UCLA, Harvard Medical School, and the Massachusetts General Hospital to carry out interventional trials encompassing sensitive populations alongside dealing with their behavioral issues. She is actively involved in training and advocacy programs in TB and HIV, and she has also worked as the state project manager for Tamil Nadu for the integrated behavioral and biological assessment project funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In a nutshell, all said and done, to me, she's a dynamic star who has shined her light on me to realize the significance of this research. And I'm very happy, ma'am, to be able to introduce you today to shine your light on the rest of us. So, ma'am, please, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, that was some introduction. You bring tears to my eyes, Albina. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I am going to... Is that okay, Vishal?
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Yes. So I really want to say hats off to the to Elsevier and to ICMR, Albina. I mean, you people, your enthusiasm is just incredible. And I just want to say thank you so much for bringing this together. And today when Fernanda said that China is leading, going, way past the US in a way, everything China's in, come on, Indians, I think we need more. We need more efforts. And I think this kind of a platform is going to really stimulate that. And I'm sure, Fernanda, when you have your next presentation, you will see a different graph altogether. Yeah. So today I'm going to talk about, again, effective writing skills. And like Albina said, my forte is social behavioral research. And so I'll be focusing a lot. And I want to bring to your attention that whatever I say today is based on more than 3 decades of research work. It hasn't been easy. Like Fernanda said, that you can have your rejections, you fall down, you rise again. But that challenge is really important. And I'd like to quote, I always had this passion for writing, and who stimulated me was my father-in-law, who himself was a great writer. And one day he told me, the importance of writing, like Albina said, like Fernanda talked about, why do people write? He said, we all pass on, right? We all need to die someday, but the word lives on. So you can live on through your word. You can live on through what you write. And can you imagine if that has a dent on people? What more can you ask for? So that is the importance of writing. That's my little brat here. Yeah. So I'd like to just give you a lot of examples and on what I mean by my presentation today. Now, why is it hanging there? It's not moving. Yeah. So first of all, like I said, writing is one of the most challenging skills that every researcher, wants to develop. And I can tell you it's not easy. It takes time, but what is important is patience and just perseverance to get there. And kind of webinars like this with such renowned speakers can really help, because everyone talks from their heart, based on what they have done. So in terms of social behavioral research, everyone say, oh, behavioral research, social, that anybody can do. Basic science, clinical research, that's difficult, but anybody can do social behavioral research. It's not true. It's a process. It's a socio-psychological process. It includes these 2 very important components that you put together, with a framework to present your ideas in the best possible way. So again, just, going forward from what Fernanda said, what you need in your writing is your clarity. How do you keep that, reader completely glued to what you're writing? You need your credibility. And to just talk about what credibility means, it's how do you write? Like she talked about the command of the language. It's not that flowery, highly intellectual language, but she said it should be something that reaches anybody. It should be something that is understandable, not the flamboyant language that you use, but the command of your language to make it, readable, to make it understandable. Like she talked about grandfathers or people, everyone needs to understand. What's the point in acting, writing something which nobody understands? And for that, you need the knowledge of the subject. And again, who is your audience? How do you build that rapport? You can write and feel great that you've written this, the article with all the best possible, words that you find in the dictionary. But that choice of words is most important, and your structure. That is important. When you talk about structure, paragraphs are key. Sometimes we just write, oh, we are fed up, tuck one, enter, next paragraph, enter another paragraph. No, paragraphs are the most important, because that's what helps you to connect one paragraph to the other. Each paragraph might have different points, but then it weaves together, to explain that unified theme. And that is what is important. After you do your paragraphing, you write, you need to, that's just your first draft. I always say when I did my PhD, I made 7 drafts and I sent it to 7 different people all over the world. People laughed at me and said, everyone would come back, and what are you going to do about it? When are you going to finish? But that is what you need. You need that feedback. You need to really concentrate on what you have written and get what others think. So before you even write, you need to think of what you're going to write. What is the purpose of this? What are you trying to say? What's the message that you're trying to convey? Is it like Fernanda said, just for the sake of a publication, for your promotion? Okay, one more to go. Any journal would do. No, it is brainstorming, note-taking, talking to people and gaining from people. Sometimes, you know, we as researchers think, why should we ask somebody else? I mean, we know better. No, every day, like when people say expert, I don't like that word. I say, I'm not an expert. I'm a student. Every day I'm a student. Every day you learn something from somebody. You can never be an expert. So unless you brainstorm, you cannot really get down to writing, because everyone's thoughts, you know, is like gems, like diamonds when you're writing a manuscript. And then the need for a draft. Like I said, I need 7 drafts. And while it, you know, at the end of it, you feel, my God, I don't think I've left any stone unturned. You know, the more drafts, the better. So when I talked earlier about feedback, when the feedback comes, no, not, I've made these 7 drafts, I've got my feedback. Oh, who cares? I'm not going to sit and, you know, work on all those comments that have come. No. And like, you know, any journal, they come out with so many comments. Take time to respond. Albina knows the number, you know, I think we got at the maximum. I'm going to quote one of those, which we did for COVID. I think there were some more than 6-7 reviewers, which I think put 40-50 comments. And imagine sitting and responding to everybody. That's a feedback. I mean, that's for you to strengthen your manuscript. And that actually helps. You might get a little dejected, but take time, because everything means well. And it's for you to strengthen and for your manuscript to be really, you know, like to promote your manuscript in a way, to make it worth reading. So again, after you do all this feedback, the importance of revising, editing, and then it's finally publishing. I like the way she brought in the building blocks. Yes, it's final publish, and to reach that stage, you would really need to build those blocks one step at a time. So just a small little figure to, you know, to explain the process of writing. Like I said, you get your ideas together, you plan, you outline what you have in mind, not just start writing with no, you know, outline, because then you just, it's a whole lot of, it's just a mess out there. And by the time you are able to, you know, make out what you're writing, you're completely gone. Take notes, make your drafts, redraft, edit, and then finally revise. So again, I would like to say, people do not just read, especially social behavioral research, they interpret. You can't interpret really in a clinical where you come out with some regimens or basic sciences. You can't really change it, right? It's there, it's there. But in social behavioral research, people can interpret it the way they want. So you need to be very careful and to be able to have that openness also. Sorry. And for that, it again depends on the manuscript structure. I think that's how they are able to. I still remember I wrote an article on condom acceptability when the beginning of the HIV era. And it was like to say that, okay, people have said condoms as the best HIV prevention, but how do people accept it? You know, and how does it all begin? So another, like I said, I always love talking to people and getting their feedback. So one of our senior researchers said, Veena, from what I read in your manuscript, the first line in your discussion should be something that's attractive. So I find, who uses a condom? Who uses a condom? I mean, what is it that prompts, you know, condom usage? And she said, I can make out that the younger you are, the first time user, you know, the first time you have sex, you use a condom, you know, those are the people who are most likely to use and accept condoms. And she said, use the word condom habit. That was a new word. I mean, it came from a senior researcher. So the first thing is the need to have a condom habit, to develop it from the very beginning. So you know, the importance is on how you're able to interpret and how you're able to really make it, you know, something that is worth remembering. So, you know, it always, if you look at it, a structure of a manuscript, it starts broad, it narrows down, again, it ends with a broad consideration. I'm going to talk about these things more. You'll be able to understand what I mean. And the most important thing, I hear that many of you are researchers, are scientists, are students, the method section. If you're not clear about your method section, You do not have that roadmap. And that is the core of your research. If you go through your journey without a proper methodology, you're lost. It's like a needle in a haystack. And in social behavioral research, I find that one of the important things is this visual presentation, to break the monotony. When you have these visual presentations with a theoretical or a conceptual framework, that is key to making it effective. So I'm going to give you some examples. Now, if you look at this, we did the study, like Albina said, we had the study with the Harvard Medical School where we did it on fostering resilience. This is one of my most sensitive studies. It was how to foster resilience among men having sex with men. It was an RCT, that is a randomized controlled trial. And if you look at the way this particular figure outlines a methodology as it is. So how you start with your informal screening, then your formal screening, your enrollment, your assessments, and what are the tests that you do, then what does the intervention group get, what does the control group get, what are the different follow-up assessments, it's all there as it is. So instead, when you imagine writing all this, sometimes, a figurative presentation of your methodology is much more effective than writing it all down where, the reader kind of gets bored. But this in one shot, it captures your attention. So this is the importance of having a framework. A framework explains what you plan to do. And also in the analytical framework, it explains what your results are. I saw one of the questions in a chat saying, what's the difference between the results and the discussion? The discussion is based on your results. And if you have a kind of a framework, the framework is what kind of guides you, not only through, understanding your results, but also, discussing your results. So a theoretical framework. Now, what's the difference between the two? There are lots of theories. If you look in social behavioral research, you have the ecological theory. If you look at qualitative, the grounded theory, you have many theories. Okay. In conceptual framework, you bring your concepts from your research into that framework. So a theoretical framework sometimes is just, an overarching kind of a presentation of what you plan to do. A conceptual framework brings in your concepts and explains what you are based on maybe an already existing framework or something that you create. So many of our research papers, we have created a conceptual framework at the end of it. Okay. So these are the differences between the two. I'm not going into details, but it's just to say that one already exists and one is based on the concepts that you put into that framework. So how do you know what to use? This is where very often researchers fail to, do a review of literature, fail to read, fail to understand what is available, what are the gaps that are available, what you really need to have. And that's when you can base your framework. You can't just take, there are so many theories, there are so many frameworks, and let me just take one. No, it depends a lot on how much effort you take in reviewing the existing literature. So these are some of the frameworks already existing. We use this framework, but when we came into our conceptual framework on the impact of HIV on mothers living with HIV, we used our concepts in this framework. And that's our paper. You can read it. It's published in AIDS and Behavior. And this is another framework, that is the WHO Onion model, where this framework was used by another researcher, a friend of mine, and was a co-author of many of my papers, is the tuberculosis cascade of care. So this Onion model was designed, he designed it to explain, what he plans to do. So if you look at it, what are the different steps in TB diagnosis? What are the gaps that you find? And the whole final analysis is based on these steps, which you first have to understand, the gaps which you have found out through your formative research or, through a situational analysis, and then you come out with the findings to address these gaps. More of it in the following slides. So then how do you interpret your results? You interpret your results, not only on the dependent variables, you talk about the logistic regression, multiple, okay, nothing like having a visual presentation of results. So if you look at this now, it was about provider-initiated HIV testing. We're so happy that through this paper, this became a policy where all, HIV patients had to be tested for TB and vice versa. So if you look at it in one shot, you find number of patients who were registered, how many people were enrolled in our study, and then finally, how many were HIV positive, how many were negative, how many were referred, how many reached there, and what are the kind of gaps that we found out that prevented people from accessing care. So here again, it's another study that we, oh my God, this thing has gone right up. Okay, so here again, it's another study that we have done on understanding health seeking. This was recently published in PLOS. Here again, you look at the number screened, those who are eligible, then you look at the number of people who, who had symptoms and the number of people who sought care. One visual presentation says it all. This is among the tribal population. And this was a huge sample size that we had, more than 41,000. And then finally, when you break it down, and you're able to understand what are the health-seeking behavior patterns and what is it that we need to know. This was another very interesting study on alcohol use disorder, which we did. So it's how we selected the units, what we did, how we screened them, and then how many finally had an alcohol use disorder. So that is something that we were able to assess. And now I'm going to touch a little bit about qualitative research. Jayashree is going to talk a lot about it. So here, I want to just say that an important component in social behavioral research is qualitative. Like Albina said, a lot of people poo-poo qualitative research. Qualitative research, what does it say? I mean, they underestimate the value of qualitative research as a very, very important part. So it can be part of a mixed method, or it can be a standalone as well. In fact, we recently published one on, the psychosocial impact of COVID on healthcare workers, purely qualitative. You can read that. It's IJMR and Albina, did a lot for that paper. My God, I think she's thorough with the paper more than me now. Anyway, there are different ways of presenting qualitative data, but qualitative data, again, can capture your attention if you do it the right way. And it's also, like I said, how you present it, how you discuss it. So here you are in control, you are the guide, and it's how you're able to make people understand complicated social phenomenon. So here we are talking about, what are the mental health problems, the problems that healthcare workers face. So what are the challenges, trying to understand it from their shoes, interviewing them, capturing whatever they have said, and being able to bring out all this. Again, if you look at the visual way that we have brought it, being able in a nutshell to be able to say, what are these psychosocial challenges that healthcare workers face? We did another evaluation on 99 Dots, that is a digital technology for TB, where we were able to just understand what did the patients think. All the time, it's a top-down approach where people say 99 Dots is the best treatment for TB. It can promote adherence. But what is it from the patient's perspective? What are the challenges they face? So here again, we did a purely qualitative study, and you can see that as well. So if you go through qualitative research, one of the things that you should look at is the SRQR, which is a standard way of reporting. So I'm not going to go into detail. I'm sure Jayashree will cover this. So this is one way of being able to understand. Of course, the grounded theory is another theory where most often used, where you take it from what it is and build on, this whatever is available, and then you come out with your discussion. So here it is. I'm not going into that. Now, how we interpret qualitative data, like I talked about the healthcare workers' challenges. If you look at it, everything is here on what's the impact on the work life, the family life, and your general well-being, and what are the kind of interventions that the healthcare workers felt was important. So everything brought in a visual presentation, so that policymakers can just look at this, and see what needs to be done for healthcare workers. This is again, like I talked about, the onion model. If you look at it, finally, you've identified the steps, the gaps, and then you try to interpret, or in each gap, what is the loss that has happened? What is the loss at the hospital administration? Or what are the losses? Where do people fall out for treatment in TB care? Same thing here. And then I'm not going to go into details of this. So some of the, to strengthen, to kind of bring in a lot of, authenticity to qualitative research, because there are no percentages, numbers, there's no regression. It is the excerpts that come out, and that is key. Like if you look at, why is it that there are so many problems? Why do people fall out of treatment? Why are they lost to follow-up? So here we went to a tertiary hospital for an initial checkup. They didn't tell us much. They said go to number 3 outpatient. Then they said go to number 5. And then they asked us to come again. After running from pillar to post, we just gave up and returned home. So, no one told me anything about my diagnosis. So very, very rarely do we understand what the other side of the coin is, what patients think. Who cares? Whoever thinks of a patient's point of view to understand health system barriers. You never understand. You're either blaming the, blaming the patient all the time. Oh, he doesn't come. It's so difficult to track him. But what happens? What is it that doesn't make him come? So here again, after being admitted to the hospital, my mother said to me, if you don't take me home, I will cut my throat. You know how they can. So we discharged. And then they say, they just, force themselves out of the hospital. What happens? What is the kind of care? What is it that the health system offers people? Here again, I talked about the 99 dots, which I talked earlier about the digital technology. Here you find they don't even understand. There is no cell phone access. There is no network access. There's so much stigma when you have a phone, where you have to call and say that you've taken imagine taking using the phone to tell people, yeah, I've taken my medications. So the health policy makers will just expect you to do all this. But what is it from the patient's perspective? This again is our MSM study. Like I said, based on whatever we had done, it is trying to understand why they are vulnerable to HIV. What is it that makes them, vulnerable to sexual risk? And here you find the key is lack of self-acceptance. And what are the different, reasons for this? One is the not having family acceptance, the pressure to get married. Even if you are gay, you have to get married. Nobody can even talk about it. The stigma that you have, the childhood sexual abuse. So all these things, we put it together and came out with a model to understand what are these kind of challenges facing men who have sex with men, and what is it that makes them vulnerable to sexual risk. So this is another one where we talked about now in COVID, it was all about, everything is telephonic, right? You can't do face-to-face interviews. So here we did another small interpretation of what it is, to be able to adopt a different methodology in COVID, research, because you need to use the phone more than face-to-face interview, which is the most important in research, but you need to also be flexible, right? And the key to any research is what is the implication of that research. That is important, not just research for research, not just publication for publication, but how does it impact policy? Like I said, some of the things that we are so happy, one is the referrals from HIV to TB. Another one is being able to, make the TB people understand the need for alcohol intervention for those who have a problem, because that was the main reason for default. So the need for counselors, So everything that you have now, understanding health-seeking behavior, the need for more awareness in tribal areas, especially in a language that they understand, to promote health-seeking behavior. So everything has to have an implication. And so one of the ways Fernanda also talked about dissemination. She talked about the importance of talking to people, presenting at conferences. And another way of doing it is through policy briefs. We make sure all our research ends with a policy brief. A policy brief has to be brief, because policy makers do not have time. While you need to disseminate, we always have a dissemination workshop. We also have a policy brief. So you can see all our policy briefs in the ICMR web. We have it all published there. So that is important. And how you do it, it's no one size fits them all, but you need to have a small executive summary, a background, a problem statement. You don't have to have too much of percentages, and you just need to say it as it is. And what is it that you recommend for policy change? So these are some of our examples of our policy briefs. Yeah, and so these are the references which I leave behind with you. So with that, I'd say thank you. I hope I haven't overshot my time. Thank you very much.
Not at all, ma'am. In fact, we were actually so engrossed in what you were, presenting. It was really an interesting talk. And I think you over-exceeded our expectations that were created by our introduction from Elvina, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. And we definitely look forward to the question answers, because there are a lot of questions people have asked, but we'll do it at the end. On this note, I would like to introduce our next speaker for today, the last speaker, Dr. Jayashree Kathiresan, who is a public health physician with a postgraduate degree in community medicine from the renowned PGIMR Chandigarh. She holds the post of Scientist D at ICMR National Institute of Epidemiology. She has over 7 years of experience in teaching medical undergraduates, public health scholars, and postgraduates. Her areas of interest in research include tuberculosis epidemiology, including economics, operational research for public health, systematic reviews of interventions for tuberculosis, comorbidities, and medical education technology. She has over 50 scientific articles published in high impact journals and chapters in public health textbooks. While working on providing essential pieces of evidence for tuberculosis control in India, her ultimate goal is to see an equitable distribution of health across all income categories. We welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Vishal, for the introduction. I will quickly share my screen, and if you can confirm if it is visible to you, it'll be helpful. I am not a host. It says I have to be, ma'am is still sharing, so only.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So, Dr. Beena, could you please, yeah, ma'am,
yeah,
now you can.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we can see your slides, ma'am. Thank you.
Sure. Great, thank you. So thank you, Albina, for the opportunity to interact with this lovely group of participants. And it was a sheer pleasure listening to the previous two speakers, Dr. Beena and Fernanda. It was, I hope I'm able to add to what they've said. I did make a note of the points that ma'am hoped that I would cover in my lecture. So thank you, ma'am, for setting up the stage so beautifully for me to take it forward. So I will be speaking about the essential do's and don'ts that could help you while you are putting together a qualitative paper or a mixed methods paper. So that's why I put it, I've titled it Beyond the Numbers, because I myself am basically a very quantitative person. Most of my work in the initial days has been quantitative research, and we all go through this process of this false dichotomy between the quantitative world and the qualitative world. And then I think I have made my transition towards looking at both as complementing each other beautifully. So I have planned my session like this. So we will look at an outline of how mixed methods and qualitative research is playing its role in public health. And given that it has already been touched upon greatly by ma'am, I plan to go through it very quickly. And we will see why we don't find much success often in, getting our qualitative or mixed methods research work across to the publishers and journals. We will take a few pointers and tips, which I have gathered from my limited experience in this field and by talking to other experts. So how to effectively present and discuss qualitative or mixed methods results. And we will see how to have more success in the publishing game when we talk about qualitative and mixed methods research. Very interestingly, today morning, ICMR National Institute of Epidemiology has launched an online self-paced free course on scientific writing in health research, very much in sync with what we are talking about today. So, for those interested, it is available in the ICMR National Institute of Epidemiology website, where we talk about scientific writing skills in health research. So off to the start. So we all understand how social determinants play their role in health. We all come from a very minimalistic view of looking at health, especially medical doctors like the one I am, where we look at it as genetically, we look at a genetic source, or we look at a biological or a microbiological source. But we have over the past few decades only, we have opened up our minds to look at broader social determinants of health and how they interplay. We have opened ourselves to, right from the germ theory of disease, we've now advanced to multifactorial determinants of health, and now the biopsychosocial models of health and care. We're able to understand the subjectivity of health workers in therapeutic alliance and relationships in communication. We are able to understand that persons are not just research participants or not just patients, but they come with their own values, preferences, and lifestyles, all of which play a very important role in medical decision-making process. Now, we also understand that all research ultimately finds its worth or meets its purpose only when it is translated into a practice or weaved into policy. The knowledge generated by the research finds its way into policy or practice. This is where the whole concept of qualitative and mixed methods research helps us to a great extent. People are not just something that can be counted. So we have seen the list of social determinants themselves. So the moment we need to understand how they interplay in their very own beautiful complexities to determine health and disease, we need to resort to social and behavioral methods of research. So I am going to give you a very few examples. These are either papers I have been part of, like this one, where we've looked at home deliveries in Chandigarh, where it's a tug of war between culture and science, because this paper was a case study and we tried to understand why a city as progressive as Chandigarh, as far as health indicators are concerned, and why would women deliver at home? Why does childbirth happen at home? So this is what we were trying to study, focusing on in-depth case study of a single woman who had delivered her child at home. So we went forth to identify in depth the factors that affect migrants, especially marginal vulnerable populations like tribes, who are having difficulty in making their way into the healthcare services. So this is another paper of a very good friend of mine. So Petro studied about what is the experience of patients who are under treatment for both TB and HIV. So what is it that they go through? So when it is MDR, TB and HIV going hand in hand, it's not a very, it's no easy thing at all. So in this paper, they try to understand what is it that is troubling them? And this knowledge automatically translates into what needs to be done to make it all a little easier, more accessible, affordable, more comfortable for these patients. This is another paper again, where we are seeing when treatment is more challenging than the disease. So we did hear about ma'am telling about the first line of the discussion being, impressive and, drawing attention. Now here's a title that definitely catches your attention, and, you want to know more. What is it that is affecting MDR TB patients from being retained in treatment when most of them are lost to follow-up? And after their in-depth qualitative study, the primary reason that came out was when treatment is more challenging than the disease. So these, until now, I've given examples of there is a disease and we're trying to understand the various facets of the disease and the healthcare services for that particular disease, and how the knowledge generated by qualitative research that has been done in this area, which is immediately applicable to changing a practice or a policy. So earlier, we associated social and behavioral sciences research, or rather all qualitative research, with something that is very verbose. And you do not immediately think of epidemics or pandemic response when you think of qualitative research. You're immediately thinking of epidemic curves and some graphs and models and projections. But then we have had a lot to learn from the Ebola experience in Africa and the recent COVID experience, where we've understood that even in a situation as emergent as a pandemic or a disaster, qualitative research is having its role. Now, a lot of material on this is available online in finding out how the knowledge generated from qualitative research is worked into epidemic preparedness and response, without which the science is not able to reach to the people whose needs it is supposed to meet. So this is the sad story of my first qualitative research, which I undertook as a postgraduate student. And so it was way back in 2009. So when I performed an evaluation of the adolescent reproductive and sexual health services in Chandigarh UT, and we resorted to a qualitative methodology then. And we had findings that we could share with the program. But then when it came to publishing in a scientific journal, these were some of the responses that I got in over 10 journals, all well-reputed journals then. The numbers are not enough. And then they said I did not adhere to STROBE guidelines. Then they said my study results are not generalizable and it lacks brevity. The way the paper is presented lacks brevity. So they came looking for graphs and logistic regression models and crisp results section, wherein they found verbatims, quotations and themes and flowcharts and theoretical frameworks presented. So sadly, we could never publish this because it is an evaluation of a program. So there was no point beyond the time when I could publish and make sense out of it. So but I would say that it is much, much easier now. It is not for us to just say that, no, it doesn't get published, but rather through the rest of the presentation, we will quickly look at the common barriers to publishing these qualitative results and also see what we can do as researchers and what editors and journal publishers can do to help us get these out. So these are some of the journals' responses to qualitative papers. So this is one, rejection letter which says we are looking for studies with more definitive but not exploratory research questions. And we are looking for those results that are relevant to international audience, that are most likely to change clinical practice and help doctors make better decisions. So this is the rejection letter which comes to you when you are trying to send in a qualitative research article. Now, this excerpt is from the paper that Trisha Greenhall and reputed authors had written to the BMJ, requesting them to revisit their policy in accepting and rejecting qualitative studies. So they had quoted this response from BMJ to one of their articles, which said, we read it with interest, but I'm sorry to say that your qualitative studies are an extremely low priority for us. Our research shows that they are not as widely accessed, downloaded, or cited as other research. They also said we receive so many submissions a year. So we are just interested in how interesting an article will be to the general clinical readers. Again, note the words, the clinical readers, how much it adds and how much practical value it will be. So this is, if this is the status in some of the most reputed journals, then needless to say about the others. So let us look at what we can do as researchers and as peer reviewers when you are reviewing articles for journals. What is it that we can do to make to have better success in publishing our qualitative and mixed methods papers? So we need to enhance our skill set in writing, and Dr. Beena rightly pointed about the multiple drafts that you have to go through, and you can also gain extra writing skills in trainings as these workshops, and nothing like practice. Go over it again and again, invite yourselves and help your peers review their article, read your article and critically appraise your own work, and also collaborate. We do not become experts, or we probably never become experts like Dr. Beena just said, but always learn to collaborate with people with a different skill set so that you complement each other, and the paper and thus the evidence generated from it benefits the wider community. So these are certain standards which help you form your, give your paper a better form when it comes to qualitative and mixed methods research. We talked about COREC guidelines, which is consolidated criteria for reporting qualitative research. Then Dr. Beena also mentioned about SRQR, which is standards for reporting qualitative research. GRAMS is more specifically for reporting a mixed method study. Now, like we talk about CONSORT and STROBE and PRISMA in the field of quantitative studies, it is a good habit to adhere to these reporting guidelines when you are pursuing a qualitative and mixed method study, because whether you like it or not, people like putting things into bullet points and check boxes. And when you adhere to them, you are, it speaks about how rigorous your article has been, how rigorous your research has been, and how well your article has been given its form. So coming to the results, how do you present your qualitative research results? Because this is where it differs majorly from your quantitative results. So talk about the significance of your data set and its social or cultural place. Give it a context, okay, where it comes from. Talk about the sufficiency of data and the coverage of your analysis. And talk about the transparency and repeatability of the analysis, because nothing like reporting all that you have done, whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Please put it out there for the reader to see what you have done very clearly. I very often say, when you're writing the method section, imagine you are narrating what you did to a researcher sitting across you. He or she, after that meeting with you, should be able to perform the study on his or her own. So that is how effectively you need to be able to write. When it comes to mixed methods article, where you are drawing the benefits of the quantitative paradigm and the qualitative world. So here there are some pointers that I would like to give you. Here there are two data sets that you were dealing with. So talk about the need to bring both into this research. Talk about how they complement each other and integrate the two parts of the study, because very often we see mixed method studies where the quantitative study stands separately. They could be just two different studies which are artificially put together, but we need to understand how they are integrating with each other and draw conclusions by embedding one within the other. So generally, we still follow the IMRD, the introductions, methods, results, and discussion structure. Even in qualitative research, we are yet to break ground there. So the introduction, like in any other article, and Fernanda had beautifully put it across, how to structure your introduction. You zoom in, you give a background of your research topic, you establish the knowledge gap that is there, set up the rationale for your study. Okay, there is a knowledge gap, but by filling that gap, this is the benefit we are going to reap. So that would be the rationale. Put forth your research question and list your objectives. In methods, I just told you, explain what was done in simple terms. This section reflects on your credibility. So please pay attention. Anybody who reads your methods and feels that you're not giving enough detail and you yourself aren't sure of what you did. See, we all are great researchers, but we are not, most of us are not as great communicators. So, which is essentially why we are here, to learn from each other on how to hone our communication skills and get better. And yeah, coming to the data analysis description within your method section. In a qualitative study, please talk about the themes, the concepts, and the categories that were generated from the data, whether it was manual or computer or software assisted, who was involved in the analysis, and in what matter. Further, for assurance of analytical rigor, we will be talking about the steps taken to guard against selectivity. You talk about triangulation, about how all sources of your data come together. Talk about inter-rater reliability, and talk about the researcher's own position. Now, unlike the quantitative world, the qualitative world, we do not see the researcher as a person who is impermeable to biases and his own perception. So all study findings need to be interpreted in the context of the researcher's own position. Coming to the results, again, here we present the study findings as tables, figures, images, maps, flowcharts, quotes. Get as creative as possible, but get the point across. Qualitative research findings offer you much more opportunities to explore in terms of presenting your results. But remember, we do not interpret or give our comments in the results section. That is reserved for the discussion sections. We will quickly go through some examples of presentation of findings. So generally, we provide relevant information about the settings. Then we talk about the phenomena under study and any particular or unique influences that should be identified and have to be discussed. So quickly, the examples. So so here we have the pathway to care for epilepsy in a slum in Chandigarh. So you can see a pictorial representation of patients with epilepsy having to shuttle between different levels of care before they actually get definitive care. So we have demonstrated the pathways for the patients identified there. This is a typical table, but here what they have presented are the themes, the sub-themes, and the suggested solutions for why eligible patients couldn't receive cash benefit under the National TB Elimination Program in India. Then this is another flow diagram where they are presenting the challenges in linking tobacco cessation services and alcohol treatment services with TB control services. So here you can see they have broadly divided. The oval ones are the common factors. They are either patient related, or they are healthcare system related, or they are healthcare provider related. Now, this is a social map. Now, very often we give this as the first exercise to a resident doctor who is new to a particular area. Now, imagine me coming from a small town in the southernmost tip of India, going to work in Chandigarh. So, and that too to be a community physician. So a social map is a quick way to understand how socially you map out the area with respect to whatever social determinants that are marked in that particular area. So it could be a potential teaching tool in public health, and we had published in the Medical Teacher. Now, this is another of our articles where we're talking about psycho-oncology services in a private tertiary cancer hospital. So here again, they have adapted to the typical tabular format, presenting the themes and the solutions for increasing utilization of psycho-oncology services. So that much about the results. Coming to the discussion, generally we present the summary of findings. We interpret our findings contextually and make our inferences. We compare with what evidence is already available. We list the strengths and limitations. We present our conclusions and deliver our recommendations. Now, coming to discussing qualitative results, it poses certain specific challenges. One, the discussion and the results very often tend to overlap. In fact, there are certain journals which allow you to club both into, a single section. But then it is very easy. It is not very easy sometimes to separate your findings versus your interpretation of those findings. So the collection and processing of the data are more closely intertwined. So there is likely that some interpretation happens during the data collection phase itself. Sometimes the methods that you use can change during the study, and this can sometimes be confusing to the uninitiated. So you need to be very clear when you are presenting them. Describe all analytical processes in very honest and convincing way. Data processing explications may be necessary to show how credible your analysis is. Now, this again poses a specific challenge in publishing qualitative research when you are sharing data, because in quantitative research, we generally share de-identified data sets and data codes. But again, qualitative research, most of the times you deal with sensitive issues and with vulnerable populations. So there are some issues there. So broadly, you could put the 6S of scientific writing. Keep it simple, short, structured, sequential, strong, and specific. Very much like the storytelling. In fact, in my workshops, I generally ask people to narrate a story from your kindergarten. And then you will immediately see how a bad narration can ruin even a kindergarten story. And I leave it to you to imagine what it can do to your research article. Again, not to overemphasize the need for reviewing your article again and again. Get the skills necessary, review and revise. And some tips: do not, get over attached to your first draft. Don't hesitate to redraft and revise until you are satisfied. Get your peers and senior colleagues to comment on your article. Equip yourself, constantly keep upgrading your skills. There are a lot of tools and software that have made this process much easier for us. Get professional assistance if required. And you could throw a scientific writer's retreat in your organization and trigger the scientific writer within all of them. Now, that much about what researchers and peer reviewers can do. Now, what can the editors do? You have to look in. Some of the current policies are very specific to quantitative research. They do not support qualitative research as much. As in even the word limits, you are not, the word limit given for quantitative research is not immediately applicable to what you would like to use in mixed methods or qualitative research. Citation rates need not be the only metric to go by. There could be other influences of your article, like look at it from the policymaker's perspective and how far the impact of an article published in your journal is. The next thing is improve qualitative research literacy of the journal's readership. Only when you start publishing are your readers going to, get better or get more equipped with understanding, interpreting, and applying qualitative research findings. Not statistics was new to everyone in the beginning. Then, slowly with the, giving those methodological tidbits about statistics. We all remember the Bland and Altman series that comes out. So something like that, which handholds the audience through understanding and interpreting qualitative and mixed methods research better. Prepared to tackle new challenges as editors when there are going to be new challenges like the one I just described about data sharing when it comes to qualitative data. Other things, we need to remove the false dichotomy between quantitative and qualitative, and you need to mainstream the publication of mixed methods and qualitative research. You need to, instead of recommending that you send it to special interest journal, that just makes some important findings getting tucked away in journals that do not receive much readership. There may have to be page and word limits that have to be revised. However, from my experience, I've seen journal editors who've been very kind to accept our request to, flex the word limits for our mixed methods research. Establish panels of suitable reviewers. Now, the more qualitative and mixed methods articles are coming in, you need to strengthen the reviewer panel also, which includes all of us. So we need to equip ourselves with the necessary skill sets. Enhance the quality of guidelines for researchers and authors. So this is again something we need to look into. As the larger scientific community, all the prejudice and communication barriers within the scientific community about quantitative and qualitative need to go, and we need to understand whichever is the research domain the evidence comes from, you look at it for the scientific robustness in it and the policy relevance and health system applications in it. That is how the research community can contribute to the world as a whole. Last, I leave you with, okay, you followed everything. The editors have flexed, you have upgraded yourself. Where to publish? Make a list of target journals. Generally, it's good to be optimistic, but have at least 2 to 3 journals listed before you finalize the first draft. You don't want to format your article and then find out the first journal of your choice asks for something else. So make a list of target journals and get your first draft ready according to them. Go through the journals archives and web pages to see what is their scope, what is their readership. Is the readership someone who you like to target with your findings? Look out for reputation of the journal. Keep away from predatory journals. See the journal's acceptance and openness to qualitative mixed methods research. Look at their word limits, data sharing policies, their turnaround, their charges, and conflict of interests. This is my last slide. So keep the communication open. I always say, whether it is the editor, there have been editors who've been very kind to us when we write qualitative research. There have been some who have been not as considerate. So keep your communication with them. It doesn't hurt you to communicate and ask for, certain queries. Responding to comments of reviewers. It takes time for the community to change its outlook towards qualitative and mixed methods research. So until then, or even after then, take your time to communicate and put out your ideas. And for take-home messages, please equip yourself. This is not something that is an inborn talent. It comes with practice and training ourselves. So writing skills, especially for qualitative and mixed methods research, have to be acquired over a period of time. Do not blindly transplant principles and styles from a quantitative world. It doesn't fit. So adapt yourself appropriately to this world. Collaborate with peers, with people who bring specific skill sets, learn from them, and also disseminate and learn and share your skills and knowledge. Be open to peer review, discuss your findings, discuss your drafts with the peers and colleagues in your workplace, reach out and open your mind to that. And also keep the communication with editors and journals always open. These would be my take-home messages, and I wish you all success in your publishing. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jayashree. I think it was a true representation of your teaching skills, and I was, seeing the kind of enthusiasm that you have. One thing that I really picked up from your presentation was the metrics section that you talked about. That you should not limit yourself to a particular metric, like we often do for journals. We often limit ourselves to impact factor rather than looking at the other part of the journal, there are so many other metrics that you can look at. Similarly, for an article, we fixate ourselves on number of citations, but we often need to understand that this can be differentiated when it comes to different subject areas, different topics, or even time periods. An article published back in 1970 has more chances of getting cited than a recently published article. So yes, there are alt metrics that are available. Like you can also look at social media impact and many other things that are available. So thank you so much, ma'am. In the interest of time, I know we are already running late, but there have been so many questions. While we have tried to answer as many as possible, I am just going to ask quickly a few questions. First question for Fernanda, and this is something that I also want to know. Different journals have different referencing styles, right? What is the significance of these referencing styles? Why can't they all be same?
I think this is historical reasons. I had to laugh when I saw, and I would answer. So I think before, you have to imagine, now it's an online world, right? And everybody's reading in Science Direct, or you're reading the journal homepages of the journals. But before, it was very different. Before, each journal had its own style, and it was very much tailored by the editor. So I think we are coming towards a way to move. So we have Your Paper, Your Way design, that basically the authors, when they submit their papers, they don't need to format in the way that the journal asks, but still we are following some of those guidelines from the past. I think it's more legacy. And different areas do prefer in certain different ways to present the data to better showcase their research. I think that's the answer.
And Fernanda, just before you go, one last question to you, then I can move on. How does the discussion part differ in the case of a review article and in an original article? Is there any difference? And if yes, what are the major differences?
So in the review article, you will not have that much. Sorry, do you want to take this, Dr. Thomas? I saw that you were online, or Dr. Kattersin, since you also have loads of experience on this.
Okay. The difference between a review article and research article is what you conduct. It's based on your research, what you do. A review is the existing research, and that is equally important, because very often there's so much work that's already done, and all you need to do is review that and come out with findings as to the gaps and what more information needs to be added. So it is very important. Review articles, I would say, are equally challenging and very important. Research article is from the beginning, from scratch. You plan it, you conduct it. It is what you interpret. So that is the difference. Maybe your article would go into a review article sometime. So the difference is yours exclusively. That's based on a whole lot of articles that are existing. I hope I answered that.
Yeah. Excellent, put it. And the only thing I would add is just that usually review articles, they are invited only. Usually it's the editors who are going, and the reason why they do this is that they want experienced researchers who have been around for a while and can really tap. It's not a meta-analysis, not just looking back and what has been published in which journal. It's beyond that. It's what are the future research outlook. What does it mean? And really, like Dr. Thomas said, it's about the gaps. what are the new areas that people can, tap into it. And for this, for you to have it, you need some leg work, right? You need to understand what's out there, what's important, what has been already done, and what's actually future looks like.
May I just add, I think today we have a lot of variety of review articles. You have everything from, scoping review to a narrative review, and whether solicited or not, I think it's interesting how you can modulate certain thoughts in certain types of review articles. And identification of knowledge gap is, I think, the ultimate purpose, whether it is a review or an original article. And yes, there is a lot of variety today. So I think it's fodder for thought.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. My next question is for Dr. Beena Thomas. Ma'am, somebody wants to use your rich experience in working in the specific areas that you have, which also somehow aligns with behavioral and social sciences research. And this person says that research data is usually collected through interview schedules and questionnaires. How can one ensure that the biasness of this interviewer would not come in between answering these questions? And based on your experience, on the topics that you've worked, can you give some suggestions or tips?
Is that for me, Vishal?
Yes, it was for you, ma'am.
Sorry, I got a little distracted.
I'll
Can
reframe
you
it.
repeat that, please? Sorry.
Sure, ma'am. So somebody wants to use your experience of working in this particular topic that you are working on, which is very close to behavioral and social sciences research. And this person wants to ask that research data is usually collected through systematic interviews and questionnaires. So how can one ensure that the interviewer's biasness does not come in between answering these questions? And if you can just share some thing from your experience.
First of all, in qualitative research, you do not use a questionnaire. It's not like what you said, systematic, or, there's no word like that. In qualitative research, it's mainly based on, like I said, you are the guide. You are the one who is, trying to understand those gaps like we talked about. So what we usually use as an interview guide, that is, again, the interview guide is developed based on your own, analysis of the situation. So even before you develop an interview guide or a focus group discussion guide, you need to go around being able to understand what is it that you're really trying to explore? What is it that you're really trying to understand? So you develop a guide for that. So the guide, again, has to be brief. It shouldn't be one unwieldy, like you say, it's not structured or semi-structured. It is not coded, pre-coded. It's open-ended. Right. Because in qualitative research, you need to keep collecting information. Now, where does your bias come in any research? Not only qualitative, you have to be a very patient listener. The problem with most researchers is they do not have the patience. They have decided what the answers have been, but they have got a preconceived of what the outcome should be. You need to be patient. You need to listen. So one of the best skills for qualitative research is, one is patient listener. Second thing is patient observer. You need to observe, even the kind of body language. So if you find that somebody is distracted or they don't understand your question. So it's not a question of your bias. It's a question of you have not made them understand.
Right.
So your bias doesn't come in. Your skill is on how you look at everyone, or if it's a face-to-face interview, you capture whatever you see and whatever you hear, but you need to be very patient. So your bias cannot come in because you are listening to them, not that they are listening to you.
Very well answered, ma'am. Thank you. My next question is for Dr. Jayashree. Can you give us some tips on the do's and don'ts of writing a systemic review or meta-analysis? Because I think there was a section where you're talking about systemic review.
Yeah.
And so what are the do's and don'ts? Something if you could.
Yeah, see, systematic reviews and meta-analysis are, they're becoming much popular. One, because we have a lot of evidence pooling in and And on the other hand, we have clinicians who don't have that much of time. So we need to synthesize evidence. So for the do's and don'ts, if you are a researcher who is looking to do a systematic review for the first time, then I would recommend get yourself equipped with the theoretical knowledge, and that you can find for free. These days, most good knowledge is available for free. Look into, the Cochrane collaboration they are the leading people in systematic reviews and meta-analysis. You could refer to their videos and online resources. You could look at the Campbell collaboration for your videos and resources on systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Then you can always look at reporting guidelines, which are PRISMA, which is preferred reporting of systematic reviews and meta-analysis, and MOOS, meta-analysis of observational studies in epidemiology. You can refer to these. I'm just mentioning 2 of these, but there are others also. There are STARD for diagnostic testing and all that. You could refer to these standard reporting guidelines so that you have an idea about how your research is going to flow. So I would say get the theoretical knowledge, look at the reporting guidelines, and for a systematic review and meta-analysis, I always say no one can whistle a symphony. So you need to get your team right. You need to have a methods expert. You need to have a topic expert. You need to have a librarian or a research coordinator. So you need to have the right people, and you need to have a complete team in hand before you start it out. And yes, so that is how it starts, and it is as tedious, and I would say even more tedious and a longer process than most original research. Good luck with your systematic review and meta-analysis.
Thank you so much, ma'am. With this, we actually come to the conclusion of today's webinar. I personally feel that the topics covered during today's session were quite interesting and relevant to the current needs of the research community. And I'm positive that this resonated with the audience as well. I would now request Dr. Albina to just say a few closing words. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you, Vishal, and thank you everybody for being a part of this exercise. And I think this is really enriching, and I understand that there have been very limited sessions on this topic, and this was of particular interest. And I have to say that Dr. Beena's light shined through, of course, and Dr. Jayashree, you did make some really take home really interesting points to ponder on. And I take a lot of points with me today, being a part of the journal as well. And I do understand where that is coming from. And I think that is this is a great forum, this kind of interaction. You are communicating the issues to the publisher. The publisher is listening to you. The editors are listening to you. So this was the entire purpose of this collaborative exercise, and this is first of its kind. So I think I feel extremely rich after each session, and I loved having each of our speakers. And thank you very much, Vishal and Fernanda and Vinita, everybody to put to put this whole thing together. I also have to say that every speaker from Elsevier is a solutionist, and I really appreciate that, not just in providing the solutions that Elsevier as a company offers to the authors, but also varied aspects of these solutions. So that is something I've come to appreciate. And again, this collaborative exercise has been very educational in that aspect. So thank you everybody for participating and making this a success.
Thank you so much, Dr. Albina. For the audience, we'll share the recordings and the details about the webinar today, tomorrow on your email. So please check your emails for more details. I once again thank all the speakers, Fernanda, Dr. Veena, Dr. Jayashree, for your valuable time and your interesting presentations. Thank you so much. We'll see you around.
It's a great combination, the Elsevier and the ICMR. I think it's a great effort. I mean, I think you guys need to do it more often, and I think this is really way to go. So hats off. God bless. Thank you so much.
This is just the beginning, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Thanks, ma'am. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.